The dictionary is the only place you find success before work, and that's alphabetical with an S and a W.
The man, the myth,
the maestro.
The legend.
His colleagues call Q. I call friend. And the world calls Mr. Jones, Mr. Quincy Jones.
Thank you. It's nice to feel important.
Quincy Jones, producer Quincy Jones.
Winner is Quincy Jones.
Quincy Jones is proof of the greatness of a single human being.
The Grammy goes to We Are the World, Quincy Jones, producer.
He commanded the entire music world with unmatched brilliance, a true giant of the industry and an unparalleled genius.
You are sculpting. You're sculpting. Just like in a synthesizer, they're taking a pure electric signal and sculpting it.
I've heard some things that he's done on other recordings that just blow your mind. And if you've ever heard a Quincy Jones record or something that was produced by Quincy Jones, you know what I mean.
Rev it.
His roots were all about jazz. His destiny was all about music.
From Michael Jackson's Off the Wall, Thriller, and Bad albums, to Frank Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon, to George Benson's Give Me the Night, to Donna Summer's State of Independence, to James Ingram and Michael McDonald's Ya Mo Be There, not forgetting 1985's We Are the World. The polymath producer's fingerprints are all over the music industry. He wrote and produced the best. Everything he touched became a masterpiece. Winning 28 Grammys from a record 80 nominations, this man needs no introduction.
He has developed a knack for being in the right place at the right time and with all the right people.
I did not engineer this journey. To tell you the truth, I don't think I could even see this far. And now that I'm older and full of wonder, I can see that maybe other forces were at the wheel.
It was only Quincy who could elevate Michael Jackson's talent to the heights he reached.
Thank you again to everybody. I'm really happy. Thank you, Quincy, and thank you for all the promotion people, including Fred D-Man.
But then,
Michael Jackson started sneaking into the studio and producing records on his own. When Quincy found out about that, he said, "We're done."
We have a take. Then he'll say, well, can you give us one more?
You had a good one, but you can do better?
Yes.
just like any other big star, there was the other side.
Apologize that the slogan, "Keep your egos at the door," ever got out of hand, because it was never necessary. It was never necessary. It was never necessary.
His later years were somewhat controversial. In two separate chilling 2018 interviews, he made bombshell claims that broke the internet. He alleged that Michael Jackson stole many of his famous songs, claimed he had dated Ivanka Trump in 2006 when he was 72 and she was 25, and even suggested he knew who killed President John F. Kennedy. Additionally, he claimed that Marlon Brando had relationships with Richard Pryor, Marvin Gaye, and James Baldwin. On November 3, 2024, Quincy's publicist Arnold Robinson announced that he passed away peacefully in his home in Bel Air. He was 91 years old. While his advanced age and health issues likely played a role, some wonder if his quote-unquote loose lips in his final years, as one of his daughters put it, may also have been a factor.
How did you do
From
that?
the struggles,
Because I said if I don't have a mother, I will let music be my mother, and it never let me down.
to the successes,
Humble, proud, cool, and so thankful. Thank you all.
to the
And he said it was
controversies.
because Michael Jackson was greedy. He said Michael should have given 10% of the song Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, but he wouldn't do it.
This is the candid, untold story of Quincy Delight Jones Jr. Quincy was born on March 14, 1933, in the Windy City, a poor neighborhood in Chicago, Illinois, as the elder of two sons. His father, Quincy Jones Sr., was a semi-professional baseball player and carpenter, while his mother, Sarah Wells Francis, a Boston University graduate, was a bank officer and apartment manager. They had recently migrated from the South to the industrial North during the Great Migration, seeking work after experiencing the hardships of the Great Depression. Growing up was tough for a young Quincy. Jobs were hard to come by for his father, who was eventually forced to work for the Jones brothers, a gang controlling much of South Chicago. At home, his mother, Sarah, struggled with mental illness and had frequent violent outbursts. Around Quincy's 6th birthday, she threw his coconut cake onto the back porch, alarming the family. A year later, her mental health deteriorated to the point that she was put in a straitjacket and institutionalized at Montano State Hospital in Kankakee, Illinois.
Your mother had a psychotic breakdown.
Yes.
Was committed to an institution when you were 7 years
Dementia
old.
precox. They took her away when we were 7 years old.
This was a challenging time for Quincy's father, who had to send the boys to their grandmother in Louisville, Kentucky for the summer. The poverty there was worse, and at one point, they were forced to eat rats. Returning to Chicago, life was still dangerous. Gangs ruled the streets, and Quincy, seeing this as the norm, became interested in joining them.
My father was a carpenter for the most notorious black gangsters in Chicago, the Jones boys, and I wanted to be a gangster all my life.
However, his dream was cut short one day when he wandered into a rival neighborhood and a gang member nailed his hand to a fence. His father went after the perpetrator and hit him with a hammer. Seeing how unsafe the streets were, the dad began spending more time with Quincy and his brother. On weekends, he took the boys to watch Joe Louis fights. The famous boxer, who had been their neighbor in the Rosenwald apartments, was a good friend to their father. He cared for the boys and even arranged for his sister-in-law to babysit them. He even gifted Quincy Sr. a pair of his boxing gloves after winning a match. These boxing gloves would turn to bring good charm to the father, but in an unexpected way. A cheeky Quincy Jr. had this friend, Waymond, who lived down the street. Waymond possessed a BB gun, which Quincy Jr. really wanted to own. So, in a desperate move, he approached his friend with the intention of wanting to trade in the gloves with the BB gun, an offer which enticed his friend Waymond. To Quincy, these were just like any other gloves, and that his father would find it no big of a deal. He was wrong. When his father found out, he whipped him so bad, then later went over to Waymond's home to retrieve his special gift back. Long story short, he came back not only with his gloves, but also with Elvira Jones, Waymond's mother, who was a single young beautiful woman raising 3 kids all by herself.
And a kid down the street had a BB gun that I wanted, and so when my father went to work, I took the gloves and traded the gloves for a BB gun. And my father wore my tail out and went over to get the gloves back. And when he came back with my stepmother, who was his mother.
With the void left by Quincy's mother now filled and the need for a fresh start, Quincy Sr. soon married Elvira, and the family moved to Bremerton, Washington in 1943, where Quincy Sr. took a wartime job at the Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. In Washington, though, life at home was far from peaceful. Elvira favored her own children, making things difficult for Quincy and his younger brother Lloyd. Rumors have it that at one time Quincy stood up to her during one of their numerous altercations. To cope, they resorted to the street skills they'd learned in Chicago. They took on a paper route, pressed clothes, and shined shoes for the pimps, turning into little street hustlers. On their starving days, they began breaking in rooms at the shipyard in search of food. One day during a break-in, Quincy spotted a spinet piano in the corner of a room. Curiously, he touched the keys, and the sound he produced felt magical. It was a life-changing moment, and from that point on, he knew he wanted to dedicate his life to music.
Slowly went over to that piano and touched it with my fingers, and every cell in my body said, this is what you do the rest of your life.
While attending Kuntz Junior High School, Quincy decided to try out various instruments by joining the school band and choir, but ultimately settled on the trumpet. He received encouragement from Kuntz's music teacher, Harold Jeans, and even from a few musicians at the Navy Yard. He also picked up some pointers from Eddie Lewis, a black man who worked at the Sinclair Heights barbershop and played the trumpet. When he turned 12, a black music teacher, Joseph Powell, recruited him into a boys' gospel quartet, the Challengers, which made its debut in a concert at Seattle's Moore Theater. Powell also led a swing band that thrilled Quincy at its rec center shows. In Quincy's senior years at Kuntz Junior High, He successfully ran for Boys Club president after being encouraged by friends who saw great potential in him. Work in Bremerton dwindled in 1947, and the Jones family relocated to Upper Seattle, where Quincy began attending the racially diverse Garfield High School. Within weeks, he was enrolled in music lessons at Frank Waldron's School of Saxophone and Trumpet, joined Garfield's chorus, and became a star player in the band led by Parker Cook. Before long, Quincy met another Waldron student, saxophonist Charles Taylor, who was the son of local jazz pianist Evelyn Bundy. Her Garfield Ramblers combo was one of the Northwest's first African-American jazz bands during the Roaring '20s. By autumn, Taylor began recruiting members to form a band. Besides enlisting Quincy, he brought in Oscar Holden Jr. on saxophone and his sister Grace Holden on piano, both children of Seattle jazz piano legend Oscar Holden. After a few rehearsals, the Charles Taylor Band debuted, playing lunch break dances, Garfield's spring season talent show, and a paid gig, $7 each, at the Black YMCA at 23rd and Olive. Meanwhile, Quincy was soaking up music via the radio and by spinning records in the listening booths at the Sherman Clay and Company Music Shop. He was inspired by everyone who came through town, whether to the theater or the dance hall. He attended every dance and every nightclub. When Count Basie's band played Seattle's Palomar Theater in 1947, Quincy met the band's trumpet player, Clark Terry, and persuaded Terry to give him lessons in the early mornings before school. While playing a show near Lake Sammamish, the Charles Taylor Band was overheard by Robert A. Bumps Blackwell. Though Blackwell ran a butcher shop by day, he was best known for moonlighting as a band leader who booked his own namesake band all over town. This alone was an accomplishment, given that Seattle's music scene had been largely racially segregated for decades. Blackwell had a charming personality that drew audiences, and he managed to break some otherwise stringently enforced rules. It wasn't long before Blackwell discovered he could simultaneously book two separate bands and earn a good cut of the income from both. In 1949, he persuaded the Charles Taylor Band to let him manage them. Thus, his original Bumps Blackwell Band became the Bumps Blackwell Senior Band, while Taylor and Company became the Bumps Blackwell Junior Band. Under Blackwell's guidance, the young musicians gained experience both on stage and in a recording studio, and his promise to help the young players quickly proved true. Their first show under Blackwell's direction was playing opposite Harlem Star Cab, Hi-De-Ho Calloway at the Civic Auditorium. More gigs followed, including memorable shows backing Billie Holiday at the Eagles Hall's Grand Senator Ballroom and opening for Nat King Cole and Louis Jordan. One time, the band played a dance for enthusiastic fans at McElroy's Ballroom in Portland, only to be disappointed when racial divides prevented them from finding dinner, a hotel room, or even a cup of coffee downtown. Instead, they drove all night back home. Quincy was beginning to find his feet, and everything was going well for his band until a tragic accident occurred one night, haunting him all his life. Quincy, along with his 5 bandmates, was on his way to play at a rodeo in Yakima when a bus hit them. Everyone in the car died except for him, leaving him traumatized. Up to his death, he never learned to drive. In March 1948, Quincy met Ray Charles, a talented 17-year-old blind black pianist at Seattle's Black Elks Club. On top of his talent, Ray had independence and charisma. He had his own apartment, bought his own clothes, and attracted many women and friends. Quincy, like others, approached him, asking to learn music writing. Ray taught Quincy his methods of arranging for big bands, and the two quickly became close friends, supporting each other's gigs and sharing records. Quincy learned both the virtues and vices of music from Ray Charles, who introduced him to heroin at the mere age of 15. Their drug dealer was reportedly Malcolm X, before he went to jail and changed his life. However, after 5 months, Quincy broke the habit when, high as a kite, he fell down 5 flights of steps and decided drugs weren't for him. A suite Quincy wrote in high school, From the Four Winds, earned him a scholarship to Seattle University after the university band loved the piece. He completed 1 semester before Boston's prestigious Schillinger House of Music, now Berklee College of Music, offered him another scholarship. He studied there for nearly a year while working semi-professionally with bands at various strip joints. In 1951, Quincy was hired to arrange music for a recording session with Oscar Pettiford, a Seattle friend, earning $17 per song. Through Pettiford, he met musicians like Miles Davis and bebop innovator Charlie Parker, whose experience with him wasn't pleasant. One night while hanging out together, Parker suggested Quincy buy them all some weed. Quincy handed him the only $20 note he had, expecting some change from him. Parker went and never returned. Quincy had to walk all the way home, crying and feeling humiliated. His dream, however, was to join the Lionel Hampton Band, though Hampton's wife had previously deemed him too young.
From there, I heard from Lionel Hampton to join his band because when I was 15, he wanted me to join the band, but his wife said I was too young and put me off the bus, you know.
Quincy eventually left campus, saying he'd return in a few months. And in 1953, at 20, he set off with Hampton as a trumpeter and arranger on a European tour. This trip opened his eyes to the realities of the music industry, including segregation and financial struggles. Returning from Europe, Quincy found out that his high school sweetheart and wife, Jerry Caldwell, had given birth to their daughter Jolie. As a result, he left Hampton's band to pursue a career in New York as a freelance arranger and to settle down with his young family. By 1956, Quincy was seemingly everywhere, playing second trumpet in the Dorsey Brothers Band on TV's stage show and supporting 21-year-old Elvis Presley in his 6 appearances there. He soon left to work as musical director for Dizzy Gillespie. In 1959, Jones recorded 2 albums, The Birth of a Band and The Great Wide World of Quincy Jones. And after leading several concert tours through Europe with different bands, he invited several old Seattle friends to join him in a big band in Europe for a 9-month tour. However, the extensive touring brought serious financial problems. According to him, they had the best jazz band on the planet, but they were starving. That's when he realized that there was music, and there was the music business. If he was to survive, he needed to learn the difference. During this time, the president of Mercury Records appointed Quincy as the musical director of the label's New York division, where he continued to work as an arranger for jazz stars including Count Basie, Billy Eckstine, Ella Fitzgerald, Peggy Lee, and Sarah Vaughan. He also arranged sessions for big band icons like Tommy Dorsey, Gene Krupa, Lena Horne, and Duke Ellington. By the early 1960s, he had established himself as an in-demand arranger and producer, working on Count Basie recordings and Leslie Gore's top-selling singles, It's My Party and Judy's Turn to Cry. In 1961, Quincy was promoted to vice president at Mercury, making him the first black person to rise to an executive position at a major record company. In 1964, he reunited with Sinatra, who gave him the nickname Q, and hired him to arrange and conduct It Might As Well Be Swing, an album that included the classic tune Fly Me to the Moon. They collaborated again on the Sinatra at the Sands LP in 1966. In 1964, Quincy was invited to score the soundtrack for the film The Pawnbroker. With that achievement, he parted ways with Mercury and moved to Hollywood in 1965. In Los Angeles, Quincy quickly became involved in scoring movie soundtracks, including Mirage, 1965, and Walk Don't Run, 1966. His real breakthrough came with the score he wrote for The Slender Thread, a 1966 Sidney Poitier drama based on a true story. Renowned for his smooth arrangements, Quincy soon found himself in demand for both film and television, ultimately working on some 50 soundtracks, including In Cold Blood, 1967, In the Heat of the Night, 1967, and The Italian Job, 1969, as well as themes for TV shows including Ironside, 1967, and the legendary Sanford and Son, 1972. As Quincy's career and life expanded rapidly, his high school sweetheart and wife, Jerry, felt left behind. She had set aside her ambitions as an actress to be a housewife, but Quincy was often away. Although he sent letters and took good care of his family, it wasn't enough for Jerry. Allegations of infidelity, including Quincy's child with dancer Carol Reynolds in 1963, made things worse. In 1966, they mutually agreed to separate, and the following year, Quincy had moved on to marry Swedish model Ulla Andersson, with whom he had 2 children, Martina Jones and Quincy Jones III. In July 1969, Quincy's music went interstellar when astronaut Buzz Aldrin played Sinatra's Fly Me to the Moon during Apollo 11, NASA's first lunar landing mission. In the meantime, he signed with A&M Records, and his first 3 solo albums each received Grammy Award nominations. Among his most popular were Walking in Space, 1969, Gula Matari, 1970, and Smackwater Jack, 1971. Overall, Quincy would go on to receive 80 Grammy nominations, with 28 wins and 7 Academy Award nominations. Going into the 70s, Quincy briefly managed a Seattle funk soul band, The Black on White Affair, produced Billy Preston's I Wrote a Simple Song, 1971, and produced Aretha Franklin's Hey Now Hey, The Other Side of the Sky, 1973. In 1974, Quincy faced several challenges. He divorced his second wife, Ulla, and the day after married American actress Peggy Lipton, with whom he had 2 children, Kidada and Rashida Jones. That same year, he had a near-fatal cerebral aneurysm.
What happened?
Well, I had the main artery to my brain. It had a congenital weakness and it burst.
During a 7.5-hour operation, doctors discovered a second aneurysm that was about to rupture, requiring a second surgery. Although he survived the ordeal, Quincy was unable to play the trumpet after his illness. Nevertheless, he returned to work and in 1975 founded his own company, Quest Productions, which would release many albums. Between 1976 and 1978, he produced 3 hit albums for funk pioneers, the Brothers Johnson, and in 1978, he produced the soundtrack for The Wiz, starring Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. While working on The Wiz, Michael Jackson asked Quincy to recommend producers for his upcoming solo album. Quincy suggested several names but eventually offered to produce the record himself. Jackson accepted, and the resulting album, Off the Wall, sold about 20 million copies, making Quincy one of the most powerful record producers at the time.
Off the Wall, Michael Jackson.
This is wonderful. Thank you again.
Quincy and Jackson's next collaboration, Thriller, sold 65 million copies, becoming the highest-selling album of all time. Their third and final collaboration, Bad, sold 45 million copies. To date, the reason behind their split still remains a topic of discussion. Was it a result of rivalry, betrayal, sabotage, or did they just grow apart?
The story I heard was that Michael Jackson started sneaking into the studio and producing records on his own. When Quincy found out about that, he said, "We're done."
No, I don't think Quincy quit because of that. Quincy quit because he was tired.
Okay.
And Michael was cool with it.
When they began working together, Michael was a young, enthusiastic artist, while Quincy was already a seasoned industry mogul.
He's difficult to work with?
No, he's not difficult at all. He'll say it's beautiful.
Although they were a dream team on paper, elements like ego and creative differences gradually caused friction. At 45, Quincy had achieved almost everything and had a clear formula for success, which sometimes came off as dictatorial to those around him, including the younger, more experimental Michael.
We have a take. Then he'll say, "Well, can you give us one more?"
You had a good one, but you can do better?
Yes.
When the hip-hop era began, Michael suggested incorporating it into his music to keep up with the trends, but Quincy strongly declined. Another factor was their generational gap. Quincy came from an old-school background, while Michael's generation freely expressed themselves and was seen as radical.
Sometime in the studio, Michael would say, "I don't know what Quincy does."
Quincy's attempts to manage Michael's image, including his resistance to Michael's surgeries, added tension. Moreover, Quincy's broad collaborations with other artists clashed with Michael's suggestion that he work exclusively on his albums, a notion Quincy rejected. As years went by and Michael grew older, he began to understand the industry more and wanted more control over his art and was eager to leave the nest. It's strange to note that after they parted ways, Michael never truly found peace with all those cases on his ass. Away from that, there's a section of those who believe that the two simply grew apart and had to go separate ways. They certainly were not the first to split due to creative differences. In the early 1980s, Quincy embarked on numerous projects. His 1981 album, The Dude, was critically acclaimed, yielding multiple hit singles. In 1984, he produced Frank Sinatra's L.A. is My Lady, and in 1985, he scored The Color Purple. That year, he organized the We Are the World fundraiser for Ethiopian famine relief, which became the best-selling single of all time. By 1988, Quincy had partnered with Warner Communications to create Quincy Jones Entertainment, producing movies and TV shows. Quincy's production expertise led to collaborations with countless artists, including Patty Austin, Celine Dion, Rufus with Chaka Khan, Donna Summer, and Ernie Watts. His 1989 album, Back on the Block, was groundbreaking, blending jazz icons, pop stars, and hip-hop rappers. Fast forward to 2018, Quincy's rambling interviews with GQ and Vulture created a stir as he made claims about various contemporaries. He called Michael Jackson a greedy motherfucker who stole music, labeled the Beatles the worst musicians in the world, alleged that Marlon Brando had relationships with Richard Pryor, James Baldwin, and Marvin Gaye, and claimed to have dated Ivanka Trump in 2006 when he was 72 and Ivanka was 25. Although he later apologized, he faced public backlash, and even his daughter criticized him as Mr. Loose Lips. Many even questioned his own sexuality, as rumors had it that he may not have been clean himself. Encounters with Tupac, Tevin Campbell, and many others seemed to be suggesting he scored an own goal by spilling tea about others without carefully examining his own. Many of his ardent fans say that anything that was said in the recent years by Quincy, more so on writing and not a clear verifiable video, should be taken by a pinch of salt. With all said and done, despite his flaws, Quincy Jones undeniably revolutionized the music industry. A genius with unparalleled musical gifts, he lived a life fueled by passion, creativity, and masterful talent. Thank you, Quincy, for sharing your gift with the world.
Each act of creation can be another powerful pillar beneath this life of this wonderful and troubled nation of ours.